That's because we're cool. All right, we're live.
Like,
We're
all
live
that
and in charge. Another edition of EverybodyHatesCleveland.com, the podcast. I am the yin. Mike Hattery is the yang. God, those are bad titles.
They're very bad, Jim. Let's
I can't be the executive yin and you the executive yang. At least it's not Wang. That would be a whole different thing.
that'd be a large PC problem. I would say like rack on tour extraordinaire and the other guy here. Let's call me the other guy here.
I think
we'll go with
that is better than last week's the guy staring back at me. I don't know. That sounds kind of creepy.
But am I really here? I mean, in an existential way.
Don't we?
Am I really
we
here?
probably need. Do we need Grim for that?
I think we need Grim.
That's coming. That is coming. Today we are talking about what everybody has been waiting for. I know Mike has been waiting for this. I have been waiting for this. This is our far and away favorite position, and there's no irony. There's no catch-22ism. There's no sarcasm. This is all 100% true. We are talking about the bullpen. And if I had crowd cheering, it would not have played right there. Mike, we have lots to say. This podcast will be over soon. The given, Cody Allen. And listen, Cody Allen's going to be great. I'm not going to say a whole lot about him. And this is me saying this without irony. He's the anchor of the bullpen. He's the guy who's going to probably keep this bullpen balanced. I also, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh gosh, he's going to cost too much next year. We better trade him. And I know that's a terrible way to start this pod because it's going to, I can think of two people right away who are going to call me an ass, but they'd call me an ass anyways. I mean, Cody Allen's really good, right?
So I'm going to read a brief list of people who posted higher relief pitcher WAR in 2015. If you hear me not reading names, it's because Cody Allen was first in relief pitcher WAR in 2015. He's exceptional. I think that he's one of those people that I guess he doesn't throw as hard as Aroldis Chapman, and he didn't play in the Atlanta and now Boston market like Craig Kimbrell, but Cody Allen's pretty special. His peripherals are special, his production's special, and he's pretty cheap. So we can talk about trading him once arbitration escalates his contract costs. But yeah, I mean, we talked about this off air. He's special. You have the best rotation in the American League feeding into the best closer in the American League. So really, you got to find a way to have 2 good innings in between, maybe. Sometimes less than 2 good innings in between, often 1 inning in between an elite starter and the best closer in the American League. So, you know, people can kvetch and moan about this Indians team, but, you know, that's a pretty positive piece in the right direction when you have that sort of dominance throughout a baseball game.
Yeah, and I don't really want to spend too much time on Cody Allen. I just think that especially for Cleveland Indians fans, you know, we have been looking for the guy for year after year after year, and we've had some interesting, if not heart-stopping, additions of closers over the years, from the Mesa experience all the way up until Cody Allen won the job from Chris Perez and a slew of some other guys that were kind of in the mix there. You know, it's nice to finally have a guy who makes 1 mistake or 2 mistakes a year, as opposed to a guy who makes a mistake every other game he's out there, whether it be by walking or by giving up really bad home runs. Cody Allen does make a mistake here and there, but is locked down. Do you see that continuing this year, Mike? I mean, there's no reason not to think he's going to continue to be the guy, aside from the fact that he does seem to pitch at weird times. Francona does use him in odd times. And do you think he could struggle with maybe his arm being a little tired this year, or is he just in the groove of his prime?
Yeah, I always worry about bullpen guys. So I don't worry about Allen any more than anyone else I've ever worried about, other than bullpen guys make me nervous. I think that some of them have short shelf lives. His stuff is special. He has a beautiful, exceptional curveball, exceptional fastball. I worry a little bit, but not much. He's been overused. I mean, Francona has used Shaw and Allen more than I think any other pitcher in baseball the last 3 years, 2 or 3 years. So that's not a positive thing. But I'm not too worried. I think Allen's going to be exceptional again. I think, Allen's probably, I think we're always talking about overrated and underrated and guys we ignore, but I think we kind of forget how special Allen is and how valuable he is for the Indians.
34 saves last year. I think this rotation will be better this year. It'll be interesting to see how many saves he ends up with. Not that number is an important one, but with as you mentioned, with a lot of guys going deep, it should be kind of fun to watch what he does. It'd be nice to see him get some nice short outings this year and not maybe show up in games where they're down 4, but we'll see if that happens. All right, next 3 guys, obviously in some form, probably Zach McAllister, Brian Shaw, Jeff Manship. All 3 were beyond outstanding last year, especially considering what our expectations were, I think, especially from Manship. But would you not agree, Mike? Right now, as it looks, the 4 anchors, the 1 anchor is Cody Allen, and then the guys who are dropping the anchor will be, in one way or another, probably right now, Shaw in the 8th, and then McAllister and Manship as the guys kind of supplementing Shaw, or maybe altering with Shaw. Do you see those as being the 4?
I do. I certainly have trepidation with 2 of those guys, and not the 2 guys people generally think. I think McAllister is going to be exceptional. I think he'll end up as the 8th inning guy this year. Shaw, to me, always looks like he exists on the edge of a cliff and is waiting to finally fall off it. And I would really rather it not be this season. Manship is a guy where they work some magic, and I don't understand it. There are some things that look tangibly better, but I think we may be looking at a situation where Manship regresses. I'm not sure something changed. I think something, I think he might have just kind of had a little bit of something that was lucky.
Well,
he might regress.
As much praise as Callaway gets for the rotation, I mean, he should be heralded as some sort of king of some, I don't know, island nation somewhere, based solely on the fact that Manship was so ungodly untouchable last year. I mean, he really was. I can't believe I'm using the term Jeff Manship and untouchable, but that's really what he was last year. I mean, he made. He really was that piece that held that bullpen together. We knew we were going to get McAllister. We knew we were going to get some form of Shaw, whether it be mostly good, some bad, or mostly good, which is what it turned out to be. Manship was the guy. I mean, he, heaven forbid, took the place of Scott Atchison. But I hate the word regression, but certainly, I mean, he can't. If he performs the way he did last year, I mean, I mean, our bullpen's going to be scary good, right?
Certainly. I think they need one of Shaw, Manship, or Armstrong to have good seasons to have a really elite back end. If you have McAllister, I think is going to be very good. Allen, you really just need one of those guys to kind of to sustain, or, in Shaw's case, or one of them to make the leap. And I think you then have a really good pen, really possibly elite, which is interesting. I think the stuff on those guys is, I don't know. I really, Manship is someone, I certainly have opinions, and some of them are rarely based in fact, but Manship is someone that I have zero feel for. And the more layers of the onion I unpeel, the less I understand Jeff Manship.
Well, we got a year out of him. I'll be shocked if it happens again. I'm just going to lay it out there. I mean, my fear right now is that Manship implodes, or maybe implodes not the right word. The old pumpkin analogy, perhaps the carriage turns back into the pumpkin. And Brian Shaw, as I mentioned prior to, off air, I feel kind of like we've already had the icing with this guy, and we're ready to start, going to the store to buy Cool Whip to spread on bread. If we get anything out of this guy this year, I'd be shocked. He just keeps performing at a level that makes him very useful. Hopefully we get that again. The fun part of this bullpen, though, if there is such a phrase for any sort of bullpen, and just so for those of you out there, Mike and I kind of agree. We agree probably more often than we don't. but I think we really agree on the bullpen. They're so volatile, and the fact that we can talk about 4 guys as being anchors in a bullpen is a good thing if it pans out. There are a lot of interesting guys, though, that we have this year. If you start with the lefties, Mike, we've got, probably the go-to guy is Kyle Crockett. We've got Giovanni Soto there. We've got Gorzolani there. We've got Thatcher. I want to say I'm forgetting a couple of guys. Detweiler's the guy I was thinking of as another guy that could be interesting. You got to think they're going to have one for sure. I got to think 2, possibly, depending on how many guys Francona keeps. And I've not looked at the first 3 weeks schedule, and I'm not really sure how that falls out. My guess is maybe we'll have more than less. But is Crockett the guy for you, or do you see another lefty maybe stepping up?
Yeah, I think Crockett's most likely the guy. I really like Joe Thatcher. I'd say he's kind of my second favorite option, and then probably Gorzolani and Soto are 3A, 3A and 3B. But I really think the Indians go with one lefty, and I pick on Francona, but I hope that he is wise enough. I think this is a roster where you have a rotation that goes deep into ball games. You have an outfield that's going to be a mess until Brantley's back. I'm okay going with an 8-man pen once Brantley's back, but I think you need 5 outfielders to kind of mix and match them daily. And I just don't see how you can go with an 8-man pen, which probably means you have to cut a lefty. So I bet they go with Crockett, or I bet they keep a veteran, send Crockett to AAA when they get Brantley back and can cut an outfielder. They move to a 2 lefty pen, an 8-man pen, and call up Crockett.
Yeah, well, and the thing with Crockett, Soto, with some of these guys is they have options available, whereas some of these non-roster invites they might use as throwaway guys early in the year until they get to bring up Crockett. So that's a very valid point. The option card is one that I'm not going to say. I will say this about Francona and the front office. They're very adept at kind of manipulating that as much as they can. It could be that Gorzolani and Thatcher, Detweiler, they're simply as multiple throwaway guys, dependent on what their contract says or when they have to be with the big league club. So it could be fun kind of watching how that dance is played out. They are interesting, and there are a lot of interesting pieces there. But I think ultimately when we're in July and August, we're probably going to be looking at Crockett and Soto. Past them, looking at some of these other guys that if you're looking at a 5th, 6th, 7th guy in the bullpen, Joba Chamberlain is now with the club. He's a guy I think that, we've obviously the famous game against the famous game in Cleveland in 2007 with the Nats flying all around. He's now with the team. He's an interesting guy, Mike, and we were talking off air, and you seem to think, and I truly haven't been paying much attention to this, but do you think he's a guy that they're looking at as a veteran guy in the bullpen that's going to be there as a washaway guy in the 5th and 6th and 7th, perhaps?
Yeah, to me, Chamberlain and Stammen are the 2 most likely of the minor league signing guys to get their big league contracts picked up. I think they both have the best track records and sort of stuff. I don't think Otero has much of a shot. And
when will Stammen be available though? He's hurt, right?
Yeah, I think he's it's going to be a month into the season, so I guess not out of camp. But to me, the guys who are most likely to log big league innings of these minor league invites, I'd say, are Chamberlain and Stammen.
Well, what about Tommy Hunt? Tommy Hunter's an intriguing guy too.
I think from my understanding, he's a lock. Which makes this really messy. Like how far down the righty list can they go? I mean, I think one of the good conversations we can have is, hey, like Tommy Hunter might be the 5th best, 4th or 5th righty, and then Chamberlain and Stammen are 6 and 7. And those are that's a lot of depth to sort of say which one looks the best in spring. Let's ride that gun. So I think that's really positive.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know, I think that one interesting piece to all this, and we're as we wrap this up, is that, as I mentioned previously in the outfield discussion, while, the outfield kind of looks like a mishmash of people right now, there are interesting tools in the toolbox. And once we solidify with Brantley, that toolbox will be taken care of. I think the one thing I can say about the bullpen toolbox is that, if two of those four guys we mentioned, Cody Allen, and I agree with you, Zach McAllister, hold down that anchor spot. If we can get Manship or Shaw, one of the two or both, to perform close to where they did last year, or at least, solid for much of the year. And then we get two or three of these other guys that we mentioned to kind of rise to the top, by August. I think our bullpen could be one of the better bullpens in baseball. And as scary as that sounds, we didn't even talk about Austin Adams, who's got some flair there as well. We have pieces to kind of play around with in the early parts of the month. And I think when you look at a team like Kansas City, and we look, as we'll eventually look at the AL Central as a whole, I think, obviously Kansas City has a great bullpen. We want to compete with Kansas City. We got to match that bullpen. I think we might have pieces, Mike, that could be put together and played around with throughout the year to give us a bullpen that can at least be in the same shade as Kansas City, right?
I agree. I think I foolishly forgot about Hunter, but he has really high upside stuff on the back end. McAllister's stuff plays up to, he's not going to be Wade Davis, but his stuff plays up similarly, where his stuff really plays up out of the pen. And Cody Allen, I think, is better than Wade Davis.
Well, and we haven't yet figured out what McAllister is yet. I think, last year was his first beginning to end season in baseball as anything but a starter. So I don't care what anyone says. You don't just walk into any sort of role, let alone a bullpen role. And I think it's hard for a guy they're still talking about McAllister. Frank Kona throws out a snarky remark the other day that McAllister could be fighting for number 5. And I don't you think McAllister to me has always been kind of mercurial that way. I think he wanted to be a starter last year. I think if this guy gives in, I think we could, again, I'm not saying he's going to be elite. I'm not going to throw that word around, but bullpens are rarely made up of elite. They're made up of guys that know their role. That's what made that 07 bullpen so special, is everybody knew their role. Props to Betancourt, who just retired. Betancourt and Perez, they had a role and they knew how to play it, and they were electric, and they never really were electric after that. They were pretty good, but they fit a role and they fit it well. If McAllister fits his role and gives into it, I think there's more upside there.
I agree. I think there's tons of upside with McAllister, and I don't want to say elite, but I think he could be one of the 20 best relief pitchers in baseball, which is really good. I think he has that sort of stuff. I think one of the purposes for McAllister possibly being discussed as a starter is so they can stretch him out and work on his, secondary offerings. But I cannot note how stupid I think it is to talk about him as a starter. I think he needs to go in fighting for a back-end anchor role. I think they need to stop screwing around with him so he can prepare stably for a season for the first time. And I think he can be really dominant back there. And also, he's probably their 7th best starting pitcher candidate, so it makes absolutely no sense. And it was an asinine decision to make that remark. But thank you, Terry.
I just thought I'd serve one up for you.
Thank
so
you.
I think this was excessively positive, and I do want to preface it with this. And I've talked with Mike over the past 4 or 5 years long enough to know that we both feel the same way. The great thing about bullpens is when you find the right mesh and you find the right mix, it can be special. And we've seen that every so often here in Cleveland. Last year, I would say, was one of those years where things really started to mix together well. I want to preface it by this. You take Cody Allen out of the equation for any reason, and it becomes a mess. It becomes a mess, and you start tinkering with injuries and things like that. And unfortunately, that's what happens in bullpens. So I preface everything that we've said by noting this. I think the reason why I hate talking about bullpens is because it rarely pans out the way you think. So, I'm seeing upside here with a lot of these guys, and I do think Cody Allen is one of the top 2 or 3 closers in baseball. And let me take that term away, relief pitchers in baseball. I still, Mike, you've got me longing for the day where we don't have a closer, where the guy who ends the game is just the guy who happens to have the right matchup. That's not going to happen with well, really many other managers in baseball, but certainly not with Francona. But I like the intangibles of the bullpen, but also the counterbalance to this is that I also know that it could go right down the crapper pretty quickly.
Yeah, I have nothing better to say. We talked about it off air. I said that, I think we both hate talking bullpens because I think it's the classic on paper thing. I think at the front end we're saying, look, on paper, this is a really good pen. But, honestly, I can see a thing in June where this pen goes, off the deep end. You're one Allen injury, McAllister getting lost mechanically, Shaw, just his right arm falling right off away from having a mess of a bullpen. So I think the margin of error is so small.
Joba Chamberlain. I just, I mean, I want him to pitch well. Don't get me wrong, but there's just something asinine about him being on our team. I don't know. It's one of those nonsensical things that I go through. I just, let me just throw this wrinkle into all this. I think what's really interesting about this team this year is if our bullpen goes off the rails and if we've tossed away some of these non-roster guys by using them with a spot, a spot here and a spot there, what could happen if it had to is we have some guys who could kind of fold into a temporary role as a reliever. Of course, Tomlin could be that guy, and we've talked about that prior, off air and on air. TJ House could be that guy if we need a lefty in a pinch that has the type of velocity that we're looking for in location with that infield. Even in a pinch, we've got some younger guys who aren't coming to camp as potentials who could step into that role as well. Could you see a scenario where, let's say 3 or 4 guys in the pen fall apart, where we start seeing the team stash away maybe a starter or two on the 40-man in the bullpen as either a warm-up to a future start date next year, or as maybe we know we're going to need them as a 6th starter at some point, so we'll have them as a spot reliever here and there?
Yeah, who's the most interesting to you? To me, like Clevenger's role in this season is really interesting. I think
could you tell I was alluding to him?
Yeah, you were leading me down a path, Jim. You lead me down a path very well. Right to gold. Gold, Jerry, gold. So Clevenger to me could do
okay, so hold on a second. So you get these damn Seinfeld CDs for your birthday, and it's taken this friggin' long for you to throw that out there. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's too easy. I should have given a more inane reference. But certainly Clevenger I think Clevenger has the potential to do one of two things. Clevenger could shift to the bullpen late in the season and not to stay there just in case they need help there in a stretch run, because his fastball would play up out of the pen. He's good secondary offerings, decent control, so he profiles well in the pen. The other thing that I think could happen is I think you could see him force Bauer to the pen. And Bauer's interesting because I think his velocity would play up too. I think the other thing with Bauer that I'd like to see is when you're in the pen, you're throwing 2 or 3 pitches, and it would force Bauer to constrain his arsenal so he wasn't using all those pitches that he can't control and stinks
Would he though?
Yeah, I think he would. I think you could force him to do that, and if you can, I mean, whatever. If there's a way that Bauer gives up on throwing 5 or 6 pitches, I think it's probably moving him to the pen. And I'm not saying they should do it, but I can see a scenario where Bauer gets pushed to the pen, it forces him to constrain his arsenal, and he can be more productive.
Well, I'm conflicted on Clevenger. He's a typical guy to me. Throughout the years of that I've been paying attention to this organization, everybody outside the organization misses out on. People in the know kind of know how good the kid is, and then he has the season everybody's been waiting for him to have. He has that season, and while I haven't been as tied to the organization as I have in the past, I've heard that the Tri-Brass are excessively high on him. I would be surprised if he makes an appearance in the pen, and that I think they're going to protect him in a way they save players that they really think highly of. I think they think he's an top end kind of arm. And like they did with Salazar, I don't know. I think while Clevenger's arm isn't as volatile as Salazar's was at the time, if he makes it to the pen, then I think our pen has faltered a lot. And I guess that's when I was serving you up there, Mike, that's kind of what I was alluding to. If we see him in the pen, I just think it'd be great to see him. I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the rotation at some point this year, but we'll save that for that talk. Bauer's the interesting one to me. When we get to the rotation in our next conversation, when we talk about the 4 and 5 starters, I think where he falls and where these other guys fall, and this competition between 4 and 5 with 4 or 5 different starters is going to be kind of a fun one to watch, because Bauer may end up in the pen simply because he's not the best guy at 4 or 5. This is the year he has to step up. And if he doesn't, he may have to do exactly what you said, Mike. He may have to focus on those 1 or 2 pitches. And, a lot of people say he doesn't have the mentality to be a reliever. I disagree with that 100%. I know he's got a weird psyche, and I know he's extremely analytical, but I think in the history of our game, I think the most interesting relievers have been guys that kind of act the same way he does. There's a I don't give a shit mentality to him that I think maybe be a benefit to him in the pen. Listen, I'm as sick as you are of the Carrasco comparison. Look what happened to Carrasco, but it could be a wake-up call to him that you mentioned. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of the bottom end of this staff / bullpen will depend on what happens with Bauer. If it all clicks and he wins 4, I think that shifts a lot of our pitchers. If he doesn't, I mean, he's in the pen. I mean, he's in the pen. I mean, they're not gonna screw around with him off the roster unless they trade him, and they're not gonna trade him from a position of weakness. So if he doesn't earn his way into that rotation, Mike, he's part of the pen, right?
I think so. I'd be really shocked if he isn't. Do you think he's guaranteed a spot? I kind of get the vibe that they're going to run Bauer out there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and we'll get into this tomorrow. I will get into this when we talk rotation. Yeah. He's to me a lock. I mean, he's to me a lock. I do you agree?
Yeah, he's a lock. Bauer, the thing that, I think Bauer saddens me in that, I think we could see a guy, his stuff is just too special for this. His stuff is just too good for us to be having this conversation. He gets in the way of his own success, and he's brilliant, and sometimes that's a problem. So I think that, I think it's really unfortunate that we have to have this conversation again about where Bauer is going to be, because he has an elite curveball. He has great fastball velocity. He has 1 or 2 other good pitches. We shouldn't have to have this conversation. Bauer should be able to at least be league average or better, and he hasn't been yet. I mean, he's been close to league average, which has been okay, but we're getting painfully close to a guy wasting one of the best arsenals in the American League.
Yeah, and we definitively will be talking about this a lot more when we talk about that starting rotation. I think if he's in the pen, there's so many different angles of failure to talk about. And, the parallel Carrasco, up until, midway through that 2014 season, that's exactly where we were at with him as well. Further down the line, of course, Carrasco was a lot older, and I think kind of at his last string. The question is, will he ever feel like, will Trevor Bauer ever feel like he's at his last string? And that's the difference between Carrasco and Bauer that I'm not sure I can answer. He's an enigma in that he's a very confident guy no matter where he is. And I don't know. We'll see if it all works out. This is a pivotal year for him, to be sure. If we're talking about Trevor Bauer in the bullpen, chances are pretty decent that our bullpen is either shaken out really good or holy crap, are we in trouble? But again, it's the bullpen, so that's kind of where we're at. anyways. I'm not going to plug anything, Mike, other than to say this, as we've been saying with every one of these, make sure you check out iTunes, make sure you subscribe, just click a star rating for us. That would be great. And if you could, after you do that, give us a couple of comments about how much you like our fantastic Everybody Hates Cleveland, logos that Steve Urbanik has made. And of course, if you get the videos where you can actually see us, feel free to comment on my hair. I've worked real hard at it. Mike and I, we style each other's hair like apes in Africa. Take that for what it's worth. But give us a rating. Hey, rip on me for saying that. I'll take it. Mike, anything to plug? I've left you speechless.
Not one bit. Not one bit.
Check out our stuff at the site. Everybody Hates Cleveland. There are rumors, Mike. Oh yes, there are rumors that the webmaster of our site might be working on a new site. Don't tell anyone. It's a secret. With that said, we will see you soon. We have 2 things left to talk about. Maybe 3. We got to talk about DH. That'll be a 2-minute pod. We got to talk about the starting rotation. I suspect that will be a long one. And then I do want to talk about front office and management. That could be fun. We might have to bring a guest on for that. I think Adam would like to talk about that, but that's neither here nor there. Until then, we shall see you later. Check out our podcast on the positional previews. Check out our podcast on whatever else we may be talking about, and have a good one.